Keys and Kingdoms is one of the settings we're creating for the Aegis game system. We have no structure currently in place for the actual system, but the setting aims to combine your classic D&D style high fantasy with the vibes of a Disney-esque animated fairy tale musical, though generally with adult theming. Unless you run a campaign that's appropriate for children, you can do that, we're not doing that. This series of videos, using the only medium in which I can properly express myself, Microsoft PowerPoint, will show off the 10 Keys and Kingdoms core rules, people, and the manner in which we're interpreting them in our 5th edition homebrew campaign. Using the original 5e rules from 10 years ago, not the new ones, we don't have time to learn to master subtle differences to the system. It's going to be all about the imagination and telling a story in this world we're building. Let's talk about elves. When I first started this project, there weren't really any elves to speak of in the Disney catalog, except the Christmas kind. Since then, they've added these guys, but they didn't come with a ton of elf-specific lore. But it seemed to be a short-sighted idea to have a fantasy setting with humans and dwarves but no elves, so I thought I'd take a bit of a page out of the Atlanteans playbook, and that was an idea that didn't get very far. Their aesthetic is very one-note, but it was a start. Elves are in this setting. Here are the sample elves I commissioned. Design-wise, the only thing that fully separates our elves from our humans is the pointy ears, which can vary in length and sharpness. Otherwise, unlike in most settings, elves can have a variety of body types and can have facial hair. Height-wise, both men and women average about the same height as human men, while elf women are not shorter than the men on average. Skin, eyes, and hair can be absolutely any color. They favor human colors, but you can expect anything. As such, the only thing that visually distinguishes elves by subspecies is their cultural attire, which we'll go into some other time. As for those subspecies, Aegis and Keys and Kingdoms core rules shall retain the 3 that you usually see in core rules. The Wood Elves, themed after natural environments, the High Elves, themed after arcane magic, and the Dark Elves of the Underground, themed after darkness, deception, and spiders. D&D 5th edition adds 3 additional elf subspecies in later material. Your aquatic sea elves, definitely going with those as a later addition. The Shadarkai, shadow elves. I liked them better when they were shadow humans, and so their Aegis equivalent shall be. And the Eladrin, I'm just going to meld them together with the high elves. I'm thinking we just need 5 subspecies, 3 common and 2 less so. The less common being the sea elves, and sky elves with wings and shit. We'll figure out what their statistics are besides the glaringly obvious later. So let's talk about Aegis elf stats. Now, I wanted a few things from stats. The 5.5 people talked about wanting to give species stats more of the fantasy that people expect. I'm big time into that. There's historically been very little magic in core race selection. I also want to dip a bit into fairy tales and mythology to bring the feeling of, precisely that. Elves need to be more magical, I think. Not to the point of being impossible to relate to, as the elf-obsessed sometimes prefer, but more magical than they are right now. When it comes to game balance, I don't know the first thing about game balance. I just know it often comes at the expense of cool things that can happen, and I'd rather have cool things that can happen. So, base elf stats, things that all elves have. Medium size, typical medium speed. And I think elves would retain something that implies speed and gracefulness, in this case, the old +2 dexterity bonus. I'm not a fan of how that's not a given anymore. I think it should be. It's just their physiology. Never fear, in this more simulationist, less balanced mindset, I think there'd have to be a pretty good reason for a wisdom or charisma bonus, and no reason for any sapient species to have an intelligence modifier. Makes becoming a wizard more difficult than becoming anything else, as it should be. To represent their keen senses, instead of giving them perception proficiency, I'd give them the keen hearing and sight trait you sometimes see in stat blocks, mostly those of animals. I think elves can see as well as eagles. Sure, fuck it. Dark vision, I think, is thrown around a bit too much in this game. There's very little mystery or atmosphere to be found in darkness because every group is guaranteed to be mostly composed of people who can see perfectly in it. So I'd make it more of a rarity, with low light vision being more common. There's no mechanic for low light vision in 5e, so let's just nerf their dark vision a bit for now. Finally, the Fey ancestry trait that offers resistance to charm effects. That's halfway staying. Elves in the Aegis multiverse do, in fact, sleep, and therefore can be put to sleep by magic. I'd keep the sleeplessness trait for the real Fey, not for mortal humanoids who are Fey-ish. This needs some workshopping. As I said in the previous video, all the current high elf stats imply they're the result of superior education, and we're not doing that here. Let's start with how you get to pick a cantrip. Let's make it a sorcerer cantrip, not a wizard one. Culturally, I think most High Elf Arcanists would be wizards, not sorcerers, but natural magical skill has to be represented by sorcery. And at level 3, Misty Step. And that's all I can think of. That's not very much stuff. I gotta give them more stuff. Gotta make them more conspicuously magical than Wood Elves. That's what makes them high. Arcane magic. Wood Elves need workshopping too. Let's say that, as in Baldur's Gate 3, it's a single light step trait that gives Wood Elves a little speed bonus and stealth proficiency. Speed and stealth, that's the Wood Elf archetype, and I wanted to elevate that to supernatural levels. Let's say they can camouflage their skin. Not all the time, just a once per day deal, and activate a super speed. I think the super speed mechanic would work a bit like Barbarian Rage, able to dash and disengage like crazy as long as you move every round. Probably not for a full minute. Definitely still working on these concepts, at least how their game mechanics would go. No one's picked a Wood Elf PC yet, so yeah. Dark Elves would have actual dark vision in Aegis, which we'll interpret here as the superior dark vision that doubles the range. No sunlight sensitivity, I think that's too pedestrian for elves. And there'd be some innate Dark Elf magic. Firebolt would be what you get at level 1, because I want to give Dark Elves a bit of a flame theme to distinguish them from the poison and spiders theme they have under Lulth alone. Fairy Fire and Darkness would be acquired as before as they level up, and then let's allow a few peeps to continue developing cool stuffs. At level 7, Fly, self only. Elf magic always operates on charisma. You don't get to pick which ability score it is, that's just silly. If you're not a charisma build, well, then you're not great at your innate elf magic, are you? You can't be great at everything. Elves in the Aegis system have an average lifespan coming up on about 4 centuries, with the possibility of living a lot longer. Creature type is humanoid. They have connections to the Fae ancestry, but they are not Fae. The law of monophyly isn't really a thing in the creature type system. A typical elf speaks Common and Elven. I prefer Elven as a name for a language rather than Elvish. And as always, the alignment of most elf societies is chaotic good, promoting the ideals of kind-heartedness, free-spiritedness, and individual expressionness. Dark elf culture, however, is neutral evil, requiring you to be cold, ruthless, and ambitious in order to survive. Thanks for joining me. Stay tuned for more vids on the peoples of Keys and Kingdoms.